A reading from the book of the prophet Ezekiel. As the Lord spoke to me, the Spirit entered into me and set me on my feet. And I heard the one who was speaking say to me, "Son of man, I am sending you to the Israelites, rebels who have rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have revolted against me to this very day. Hard of face and obstinate of heart are they, to whom I am sending you. But you shall say to them, 'Thus says the Lord God.' And whether they heed or resist, for they are a rebellious house, they shall know that a prophet has been among them." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joses and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place and among his own kin and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. The Gospel of the Lord. All right, so remember we would say that oftentimes there's a common theme that runs between the first reading and the Gospel. So if you had to pick a common theme out of these two readings, what do you think the first one that would come to mind would be?
Actually, all three readings. The frustration of the prophet.
The frustration of the prophet. Okay, that works.
They're not being heard.
Okay. Yes, but I think I would go even more strongly in that direction.
Rejection.
Right? Rejection and rejection of divine word, right? Because Paul is just complaining that, he's feeling these things, right? It's in the greater context of his defense of himself, but he's talking about weakness and strength. In Ezekiel, God is telling his prophet, they're not going to listen to you. Like, I'm going to give you a great message to tell the people. They aren't going to listen. And Jesus here, Mark says at the very end, Jesus was amazed at their lack of faith. So usually in Mark, when you see amazement, it's people looking at what Jesus says and what Jesus does, and they say, the people were amazed at what Jesus had done. And in this one, it was Jesus who was amazed at the rejection, at the divine message that wasn't being heard. So there's your linkage for you. If you want to point to something when you read the Ezekiel on Sunday, it's that rejection, right? It's that the people are stiff-necked and not going to listen. That's where I think people will make that connection as well, based on our proclamation of the readings. Okay? Did anything stand out? Oh, let's talk about Ezekiel real quickly. So we are in Ezekiel. I think this is chapter 2. We're right in the beginning. The story with Ezekiel is he's living during the time of the Babylonian exile. So I don't know if you remember, but the Babylonian exile wasn't just one event. It was 3 events. The Babylonians came and took some of the best and brightest from Jerusalem and took them off to Babylon. They came a second time and took people. They came a third time, and there was a third wave of exile. So Ezekiel was in that first wave of deportation, of exile, which means if they took the best and the brightest in Jerusalem, first of all, he's in Jerusalem. He's down there in the south. He's in Jerusalem. And second of all, he's a person of some influence. Now, Ezekiel tells us that he was a priest. He's not the only prophet who was a priest, but he speaks among the prophets probably most strongly about how the priesthood is part of the prophecy. So he'll talk a lot about temple worship. And the effect of the exile was there was no more temple worship, right? So he'll get really strongly on allusions to the temple and to the priesthood. He's speaking from his heart. That's who he is. That's how he's perceiving this whole thing, right? Because remember, when the people were exiled to Babylon, they no longer had access to the temple. And they had to come up with a new way of following God, of worshiping God, right? Not that we haven't had a similar circumstance here within the past year, but when you weren't able to come to church, when you weren't able to come to Mass, when you weren't able to come to the Eucharist, you had to find a way to fill that need. So maybe you filled it with live streams, right? Maybe you watched the Mass and you prayed a spiritual communion rather than making a physical communion. Maybe you increased your devotional reading. Maybe you increased your prayer life at home. But when you were unable to get to the place where the sacrifice takes place, which is what this is, what the Mass is, you had to find a different way to worship. That's what the Jewish people of Ezekiel's time were dealing with. They couldn't do all the things that they had been commanded to do by God. So now's when you see that whole notion of the religion being of the Word or of the synagogue type worship. That's when it appears very strongly in the tradition of the Jews. One other thing that might be interesting is, they had spoken Hebrew up to that point. They get pulled out of Jerusalem, dropped into Babylon. Well, the language that was spoken there was Aramaic. So the language that the people spoke when they came back to the Promised Land was Aramaic. Jesus spoke Aramaic, and it is from the fact that they had gone out to Babylon and had learned that language, started assimilating that culture. They even started writing their Hebrew words using Aramaic letters, right? So imagine we're sitting here, and, back in the day, we feared the Russians, right? So we get picked up and we get moved to Russia, and they make us learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, but we start writing English words in Cyrillic letters, right? That's what they were doing. So that Aramaic as an influence came in from this Babylonian experience that Ezekiel was part of, right? So this is right at the beginning. There's a lot of Ezekiel, but this one I think they chose because of that rejection theme, right? So Ezekiel is being commissioned, and God is warning him. I'm going to give you a message. It's an important message. It's a divine message. They're not going to listen to you, but it's important to give the people that message nevertheless. Any questions about that part of it? Yeah, go ahead. Here.
Well, not what you were talking about, but basically the thing that hit me, it seems like you have to have faith for Jesus to be able to work, for the apostles to be able to work.
Okay.
And I remember something, I think in the Acts of the Apostles, when the apostles was trying to go out and heal, and they can't.
Yeah.
But
It's an important thing, right? Because on one hand, you want to say, this is Jesus, this is God. Of course he has power. As you start reading the epistles of Paul, he really delves into this relationship between power of God on one hand and on our power to disbelieve on the other, right? So, what the Catholic Church has always taught is that it's the two of these working together that make it work. If all you have is God's power, if all you've got is belief, and belief that's not there of God, you've got to bring together the power of God and the belief that brings human action. And when that happens, that's when amazing things happen. So, this was something that really scandalized people, right? First of all, the whole thing, he is the son of the laborer. Like, we use the word carpenter. The word is technon. It means a laborer. Could have been a stonemason, could have been whatever. It's somebody who makes their living with their hands. This was really scandalous in that day and age. What do you mean your leader is a laborer? He's not a scholar. He's not royalty. He's just a laborer, right? And that's the thrust of this gospel reading, right? They said that they took offense at him. The word that they use is the Greek word that we get scandalize from, right? That word really means a stone that sits in the road that is a stumbling block to you, right? Jesus was a stumbling block to them. They couldn't believe, because all they could see is the son of the laborer, the son of Mary, the kid who grew up in the neighborhood with all the other kids that they knew. They couldn't see Jesus. They could see the stuff he did, right? Because they're marveling at it. Where did he get all of this teaching and wisdom? Look at the mighty deeds that he's doing with his hands. These aren't the hands of a miracle worker. These are the hands of a laborer. All right? So they were scandalized by him. They just couldn't see past who they knew him to be on the surface, to see who he really was. Even in the face of the fact that in Mark 6 already we've seen how many miracles. They knew what was coming. They had heard about Jesus. They were waiting to see him. Couldn't believe in him. So, Larry, like you were saying, it's this whole thing that you've got to have that faith, right? The discussion for us as Catholics, the discussion about brothers and sisters is one that, makes people wonder what's going on. Non-Catholic Christians are willing to say, sure, Mary had other kids. Catholics would be more inclined to say, no, this is either cousins, and they're using the term brother and sister in that way, or these are maybe children of Joseph, but not of Mary. Children of Joseph from a first marriage, right? So from a Catholic perspective, we would look at these names, and we would look at them in other passages in the Gospels and say, oh, look, these kids belong to that woman named Mary, these kids belong to that woman named Mary, because we see other Marys in the Gospels being mentioned as the mother of these people, right? So this is something that can confuse people as well, right? But hopefully in the homilies, and it's Deacon Preaching Weekend, so hopefully Deacon Mike and Deacon Rick will, just mention, we as Catholics don't see this based on what the witness of the early Christians was, based on some of the things in the Gospels. We don't see this as saying that these are people that Mary gave birth to, the Virgin Mary gave birth to. Okay? Anything else out there? Any other observations on either of these? You were playing with the on-off. Does that mean you wanted to speak up? You were wanting to give it? Okay. Anything?
Father, Ezekiel is always called Son of Man.
Yeah, good.
Don't understand
Yeah.
what's being said.
Okay.
And then to that, Jesus himself calls himself the Son of Man. Is there a connection?
There is. Some of the translations you see of this don't say, Son of Man, I am sending you to the Israelites. It's more like, hey, mortal, sending you to these folks. And it really just points to the fact that, in the Bible, you see other messengers. You see angels. And God is saying, no. I am sending flesh and blood. I'm sending you. You are a son of man. I'm sending you to go talk to them. Jesus appropriates the title for himself for a couple of reasons. First of all, it does point out that he was truly human. Right? We would teach in the church, truly human, truly God. Right? Fully human, fully God. So Jesus is pointing to that. But also, you see this title, Son of Man, come up in the book of Daniel. Right? And so there are messianic prophecies in Daniel, and Jesus associates himself with those ones being prophesied. So in a particular way, because Daniel was talking about the Son of Man, Jesus identifies himself as Son of Man. In his book, The Case for Jesus, Dr. Grant Petrie will mention that the people were very oriented to messianic prophecy. The people in the Promised Land at this time, the Jews of the first century, were very oriented to the expectation that a Messiah was coming. So if you're big on all of this messianic prophecy, and somebody comes using images from it, you're going to recognize it, right? So just like if there's somebody who's big on, what's the big thing these days? UFOs. Everyone's talking UFOs. And if someone comes to you and says, I saw a little green man. I saw a disc in the sky. If your mind is already thinking in that direction, you're going to pick up on those images. And you're going to say, aha, now I know. Now I understand you. And Jesus, when he calls himself Son of Man, we would think that the people heard him and said, the book of Daniel, I know who you are. You're the Messiah. Pardon me? It's not, but the phrase shows up in both of them. But in Ezekiel, it's a straightforward reference. He's pointing to Ezekiel. You are a man. You're a person. You're a human being, and I'm sending you to the people. So, good catch.
The messianic prophecies, and the fact that the people of Nazareth would have known those messianic prophecies. And a commoner would come in and say, I'm acting as the Messiah. So that initial rejection would be the same pattern that you see all the way.
No. They would ask for a sign. You see, Paul talks about it, right? The Greeks want arguments, proof, right? And the Jews want signs, right? So if in that Jewish context somebody came and said, here's who I am, or here's what I'm doing, they would say, and you see them say it to Jesus all the time, can you show us a sign for what you're saying? So he comes in and he says all these, and now they really are saying, okay, miracle boy, put up or shut up.
But it's not a magic show.
But it's not a magic show, and Jesus' point is, look, I'm not here to be your magician. I'm not here to entertain you. Because they didn't have HBO back then. This was the entertainment. A guy would come and put on his show. And Jesus is saying, it's not the show. It's the faith. Brings the healing. Right? It's the faith. So since they have no faith, Jesus is not performing any mighty signs. And by the way, I know. I remember in one of my assignments, somebody was really ticked off that they keep using the term mighty works. Like, why did they take the word miracle out of the Bible? That's miracle. Because in Greek it's literally two words. Mighty, work. And so maybe when it came to the Latin, they translated that as miracle. But what it was always seen as was something that was done, something that was physical, and something that showed great power. Right? So the people would, if I come into town in this context, and I make all those claims, the first thing they're going to say is, show us some proof, buddy. And if I don't show the proof, then they say, get out of here.
He's not going, except a couple of years.
Right. right? So he's not, because they're asking, where's he getting this stuff from? How's this stuff happening? He won't do it. He's just, he's the kid who grew up down the street, and they just can't see it. They've heard the reports. People were saying, there's this guy Jesus. He's doing all this stuff. And they just can't get beyond who they see.
Not to say everything is going to happen over and over and over again until the passion. In the same pattern.
It depends. Because there are people who will see the miracles and believe. And there are people who will see the miracles and then say, well, okay, show me one more. Right? So it's something that Jesus faces throughout his ministry. Right? But he's not doing it to prove per se. He's doing it as a response to displayed faith. Right? We've seen that the past couple of weeks. The woman who touched displayed faith. Jairus who came because of his daughter displayed faith. Right? So all right. We missed. I didn't tape that first part of the discussion where we talked about 2 Corinthians. So now I'm going to do it in 2 minutes. Ready? Here we go. What we talked about with 2 Corinthians. It still gets to some of these themes about rejection. Paul is arguing for his ministry. Right? That last section of 2 Corinthians is all about Paul saying, "No, I want to defend myself." But in this particular part, it's really small, and he's talking about the fact that God has given him some unknown thorn in his side. We don't know what that thorn is. That thorn might be something physical. It might be something spiritual. We don't know. But Paul clearly says that God allowed the devil to give him this thorn so that he wouldn't be too puffed up. So for Paul, it keeps him on the straight and narrow. And that's a nice lesson too. Hopefully the deacons will come out of their homilies with something talking about that humility is what leads us to God, more so than puffing ourselves up. All right. Any last thoughts before we call it in for the night? So the question is, what if somebody today came in and said, I'm Jesus, and he does do something that looks miraculous to us? How would we respond? We would say, Jesus warned me about you. Here, let me turn to the part right here where he said, others are going to come claiming to be the Messiah. Don't believe them. Right? There will be pretenders who try to make these claims. So we believe that the prophecies that were in the Old Testament and God's plan of salvation, history of redemption was fulfilled in Jesus. There will not be another. So is it possible that somebody might come in and do something amazing and unexplainable? Sure. Does that mean that they're Jesus? No. Have people come already claiming that they're Jesus? Oh boy. Right? You can sit down and watch TV all night where they talk about this really claim to be Messiah and what they do. They say it. Right, and that's usually what they're claiming. They're the second coming. Not in that literal way. We are supposed to reflect the love of Jesus. We are supposed to be obeying the commands of Jesus. It doesn't make us Jesus. It doesn't make us the Messiah, the Savior, or the second coming. Like you're spiritualizing and allegorizing, digging that by. Yeah, that's cool. But we're talking about like in a literal way. You can't stand up and say at Sunday Mass, hey, by the way, I'm Jesus. Even if you can do some fancy trick that's unexplainable. We are not Jesus in that way. We are to be his hands in the world, right? But we're not supposed to sit there and go, hey, you guys should worship me, I'm the second coming, right? Because that's... So Jesus would say, don't look for signs. Like they were asking him, again, they're Jews, they want signs. Tell me what signs are out there that let me know that you're coming. And Jesus hits them with stuff that happen every day. Well, there'll be natural disasters, and there'll be wars, and there'll be rumors of wars. When these things happen, the second coming is here. And then it's like, no, wait, Jesus, these things happen every day. And it's like he's sitting back there going, I know, get it? Be ready every day. Right? So it's not important for us to ask, give me the advanced knowledge to know that it's coming. Jesus is telling you, be ready now, whether or not. Be ready always. Right?
I often think of, like, when I think of the things that happen in this world today, and the author, Stephen King,
Mm-hmm.
the very first book I ever read of his was The Sting.
Mm-hmm.
That, what things that are happening today remind me of that.
Yeah. Don't get caught up in all the apocalyptic stuff, okay? The second coming will happen. For the vast majority of people who live or have lived or who will live, you don't see the second coming. You die a natural death. Don't worry about it. Just live your life as a Catholic. Live your life in a state of grace. Let God take care of that. Don't worry about it. If it happens, it'll happen in a flash. And at that point, it's not going to be like, wow, I wish I would have gone to confession last week. All right? All right. Let's call it in for the night. And we have deacons preaching this weekend. And I think next week we're not going to do one because it's, July 4th weekend. So we'll skip next week and we'll pick up the week after with the readings for the 16th week in ordinary time.